if your business doesn't work out, or if your career ends or you get fired, then you take that so personally. It's like, oh, my
Yeah.
business failed, therefore I am a failure. Like I got fired from this job, therefore I got fired. Like I am failing. And we
Mhm.
have to be so diligent to separate those things out. And the other side of it is that if you are building something like you are building, like I am building, it it is not just a one track thing. Like it is so multifaceted that pulls in so many different
Mhm.
aspects of your
Yeah.
life that when you're running this kind of business or platform, it really does become like a holistic place.
Welcome to the Moxie Podcast. We are in the month of September, and last week you got to hear from our girls from Empowered, and this week you get to hear from my friend Leisse, which I'm so excited about. We're talking about all behind the scenes, so just the why behind the thing that we are passionate about, that we started, that we wrote, that we host, whatever it might be. And so first and foremost, I want to just formally introduce you to Leisse. And Leisse, how about you just tell everybody here what you are best known for, where are you coming from, maybe like your sign, I don't know. Just welcome to Moxie.
Thank you so much. I love being here with you. I love everything you create. My name is Leisse Wilcox, like new lease on life. I'm coming to you from Toronto, Canada, and I am the best at making you the best at what you do. So I have been known as the secret weapon of the C-suite, the Marie Kondo of your unconscious, but really what I excel at is getting people out of their own way to get the results they actually want. And I'm a Taurus,
This
like
is,
through and through.
and she's a Taylor Swift fan,
Yeah,
and
oh,
she
big time.
loves Love is Blind. Can I tell you something about Leisse and how we first connected? Because me and Leisse are in this like amazing, I don't know, kind of like TED
International
Talk thing
speak. Yes,
together.
exactly.
Yeah, we did a speaking thing. Leisse is a much better speaker than I am, but we did a speaking thing. So but the first thing we did is we were meeting virtually before we all met in person, and we were talking about what was the question? It was like,
Uh, something they were trying to get like our like tap into the shame and like tap into the deep core wounding, right? And they were like, tell us something, something like you feel shame about or something.
yeah,
Because I don't think they asked guilty pleasure, but I think they were asking for oh something you can't shut up about. That's what it was.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I said love is
And we
blind.
said love is blind. You know what's so funny is last week, I don't know if you guys know because we didn't mention this on the podcast, nor did I mention this to Brittany, but last week Brittany was on the podcast and she's from Love is Blind 6. So I know I didn't even tell you, you're freaking out.
Oh my God.
I know this is all on the podcast and I don't do any edits. So welcome Moxie community to our obsession. I will talk to you later about it. And hello, Brittany.
Hi, Brittany.
Um,
Just a fan
I
from
know
afar.
a fan from afar from Toronto. No, we love Brittany. Brittany co-hosts with her friend Mandy. You guys got to hear from them last week. But if you didn't know, we did not even mention Love is Blind last week. We just talked about their podcast and they're amazing humans.
That's awesome.
But if you want to know a little bit about our journey, you can also check it out there. She's so incredible. Anyways, we'll talk about off mic on that because we could spill on Love is
Because we're
Blind
gonna
and
get the
Kay.
goblets out. I know. And it's gonna be a
It's a
whole
whole
thing.
thing. Why don't we have gold
I
drinks while we're meeting right now?
don't
This is,
know. I
oh my gosh, that would have been the perfect episode with us. Okay. Guys, you're getting to see me a little bit unhinged. You never know what version you're gonna get of me today.
Oh,
Today I'm wearing my Cultivate Kindness hat. You guys, if you're seeing the video, you can see this. This is one of my favorite hats because it's like pure happiness, pure joy.
you are pure
Um,
happiness and pure joy.
so are you, Lise. We get a little wild when we're together. Okay, so we are here and she's in Toronto, Canada. I've actually never been to Toronto. I've been on the other side of Canada. So I need to come your way.
Mhm.
I'm informally inviting myself over. I'm just going to show up at your doorstep
Come on
one
up.
day.
Sure.
Yeah,
Lots of room.
always.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Um, so we will put a pin of where Lisa's house is in the show notes. We will not do that, guys. Today we're going to talk about Lisa and we're going to talk about exactly what she said. I think she's incredible. And when I first got to meet Lisa, and she was also talking through just what I got to hear in her talk and we were in Fearless Communicators. We got to do this really cool speaking thing together. She talked about like how we feel not enough. And so I
Mhm.
love that you get to be the secret sauce for people and remind them of
Yeah.
that. Because I don't think something that you mentioned to me, because it almost was a little bit hard to wrap my mind around. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, like we think about this
Mhm,
all the time. Sometimes it's in our subconscious, but we
mhm,
know we need a coach and we need to kind of break through. This is a random question before we get
mhm.
into all the other amazing accomplishments you've done. What is, do you think, the biggest maybe aha moment you've seen a client work through that like they didn't realize they needed you and then you were like, because of course they work through and then they like grow their business, ideas start swarming, but maybe, or maybe the most common thing that you find in your clients that when you're working with them it's like this thing that always is keeping them stuck or
Yeah.
they're just not seeing right in front of them.
So that is both the most powerful aspect about my business and also the hardest thing to sell because everybody has that one thing that's at least one thing, let's say that, that's keeping them small, holding them back. And because it's so unconscious and it's so buried, it's just like a part of you, nobody knows that it's the problem. So that's why it becomes like this incredibly difficult thing to sell to people. So, for example, when I work with people, something that we always talk about is their money mindset. Like I go way deep. Like I say money mindset for SEO purposes, but really like we are going to your core origin story that shaped your entire outlook that forms your relationship with money.
Mm,
Because if you don't know what your relationship with money is like, is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Is it avoidant? Is it secure? Is it insecure? It's very difficult to draw the line in the sand of what enough looks like and what it feels like. So that's something I do with everybody. And one client not too long ago was telling me this story of how, I've got a bunch of questions I ask. And one of her first money memories was that she had saved up like all her babysitting money to buy the CD player of her dreams. She had read the flyers, it was the 90s. She'd done all the research and she like had cash in hand going to buy this CD player. Her dad went with her because she wasn't old enough to go on her own. And when they got to the store, he was like, "Oh, this isn't the one that you want. You want this one over here. It's way better." And there was something about that moment that like cemented a belief that she's not good with money, that she doesn't make good financial
mm,
decisions, and that she has to get guidance and permission specifically from a man to make decisions that serve her well when it comes to money. So that's one of the most poignant aha moments that, we're doing this work and she unlocks this memory of like, oh my God, this is where, when they're investigating arson, they got to look for like the point of
mm-hmm,
origin. She's like, this is the point of origin. This is where it started. And
mm-hmm,
that happens with every client that I work with. We take this thing that is maybe a symptom or a story or something they don't even know they're carrying with them. And we trace it back and trace it back and trace it back to see where it started. And when we get back to that point of where it started, then we're actually able to address the real problem and heal it at like the root cause. And then we can actually change the behavior. And that moment, there was somebody else I was working with who she was she was like just on the cusp of really making it as an entrepreneur. And she
mm-hmm.
was like, I just have this thing. I feel like I always have to stay small. Like I have to stay small. So I work my magic and we're going through our stuff together. And she has this memory. She's like, oh my God, when I was little, I actually had to stay hidden in order to stay safe. Like her parents were pretty abusive, and she's like, I had to stay hidden to stay
Mm,
safe. So there was something in her ether that was like, it is not safe for you to be seen. So we go through, clear
mm.
all that out. Dot dot dot. She has a 2 book deal. She's been featured in Vogue. She's like friends with Jennifer Aniston now. It's like, I'm not taking credit for that, obviously, although behind closed doors, I fully take credit for it, just so you know. But it was that moment of singularity where she was like, what
Yeah.
am I doing? Like, it's okay, it's safe for me to be seen. And once she got that like unconscious permission that it's safe for me just to show up, literally her entire life changed. So those moments I will say do not get old. They are like
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah. I love it because then like when just as an entrepreneur and when we're pushing through and like we're like, why do we do what we do?
Hmm.
It's so good to like grab a hold of those moments and like
Yes.
remembering the clients that just like had the ahas. But
Yes.
okay, but there's a journey that got you to here. So I want to kind of
Yes.
talk the why behind what even started this to what even, like obviously you had a second edition of your book. What?
Yes.
Come out?
Yes. I'll just show it to you real quick.
I know. I want to see it.
It's very pretty to call myself
Call
beloved.
myself, to call myself beloved. Okay. We're linking that for everybody. And we'll get to that in a minute, but let's talk about like the start of, yeah, your business to jumping into this and your why of doing that. Kind of what's your journey, your, I
Mhm.
guess, story
Yeah.
that really unlocked you to want to help others.
I really wish I had like a beautifully sophisticated answer for you, but brass tacks reality is that it was necessity.
Mm,
So the very flowery story is that a number of years ago, I was living in this like perfect home with a perfect brand new kitchen with my perfect looking husband and my actually genuinely three perfect little girls. And I was looking around and I felt miserable. And I was like, if this isn't enough for me, what the hell is wrong with me? And I got this little divine voice speaking up that was like, oh, nothing will be enough for you until you are enough for you.
mm,
And I paused and was like, pardon? And I heard it again, that nothing will be enough for you until you are enough for you. So in that moment, I was like, I got to make some changes in my life. And that really the change that I had to make was I had to call time of death on that marriage, left it, kind of started my life all over again with my three little girls in tow. But in that process of what ended up being an incredibly traumatic divorce, there was no financial support or assistance that like there should have been, and it just didn't exist. So all of a sudden, overnight, I went from being a stay-at-home mom to needing a career. So I had to like reinvent very quickly. Because I had in my kind of first iteration been a Montessori teacher, I had turned all of my knowledge about childhood development and families and parenting and dynamics into a newspaper column, which I turned into a blog, which I turned into Instagram. And from there, I just started showing up on Instagram with such regularity and such emotional honesty that people started asking me to coach them. I had started a creative agency with a friend of mine, and we were just going to like take over people's Instagrams for them back in the day before we had social media managers.
mm.
And people would turn to her and be like, hey, let's talk about sales and graphics and branding. And they would turn to me and be like, my mom doesn't believe that I'm creative. Like, how the hell am I going to show her that I can do this? Or my husband thinks this is just a hobby. So, how do I show him that I can make this a viable business? So, I immediately started coaching people, went back to get coaching certifications, including life, success, NLP, executive, and organizational development, so that I now have like almost 10 years of an international business that truly meets people where they are and helps bring out this best possible version of themselves. And honestly, it started because it had to.
Yeah. You know what's so funny about certifications? Hearing all of that is super impressive. Hearing all of that too is also what gets you heard,
Mhm.
and seen, sadly. But at the end of the day, like your intuition and your knowledge, like started before those certifications were even in
A
place, right?
hundred
So,
percent. Yeah.
right. So I always talk about my pursuit for a doctorate because I'm like,
Hmm.
I had to really ask myself, like, why am I getting that? And at the end of the day, it was so that I could have a seat at the table. And then once I got the doctorate, it's
Yes.
like, I don't necessarily want a seat at that table. I'm just going to create my own. But now everybody's
Yes.
listening because I have the letters behind my name.
I have never heard it said that perfectly before. That's brilliant. I completely, and I don't have a doctorate, but, and please
No,
don't
but
plant
all
that
of
seed
those
in my head.
certifications, because I strategic coach, I don't have nearly as those certifications. Obviously, the doctorate and is equivalent, I
It
guess, to
counts.
to that. But at the same time, it's wild, right? Because it's like
Yes.
we know what we know, but people will not
Yes.
listen until you
No.
have that. And I'm not saying, I mean, that like in the end, like I said, yes, that kind of sucks. Now both of us are achievers in a
Yeah.
sense too. So we like would like to get those things too. And
Yeah,
it's like, and we like to learn. So we want to get those for the best quality of service that we can
absolutely.
give our
Yeah.
clients. So it's not just the like, oh, let me get it. At the same time, though, there's so much that you learn, like,
Mhm.
and what you can, and what you were already bringing to the table from, yes, it started out of necessity, but also from experience.
Yes.
And I think that's the beauty of what I want our listeners to hear too, is like, to just start, because
Yes.
no one goes and gets the certificates first and then the experience.
No.
Or if they do, now I know people like that, sure, maybe get all the way to their doctor, but have no experience, but the quality of
Yeah.
what they're giving is going to not nearly going to be just as good as someone who has the
Yeah.
experience, the live experience, and then
It
sure
just needs
can
to
give
back it
you,
up with a diploma. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Yeah. So I just want to acknowledge all of those because you just named a lot of certificates. And I'm like,
I
oh my
know.
gosh, those are all like everyone should be clapping on the other side. You guys have no idea. Like, those are some good accomplishments there.
Thank you.
Um, but proud of you.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk about your book. I want people to
Mhm.
know about it. I want people to know the why behind it. I want people to know
Mhm.
the storyline. But the title of it is
Mhm.
beautiful in itself. The cover is so
Mhm.
your personality that I
Thank
love
you.
it so much. It's the
Thank you.
only thing that I probably would ever own pink. I have like no pink around me but that book. So I think I love it. So talk about the book a little bit and just like the start of it.
So back in the day when I'm going through this like traumatic divorce, and again, this is like I didn't mention this in my last little diatribe, but I also had breast cancer in that period. So I went from, stay-at-home mom to all of a sudden being single mom of three, self-employed, starting a business. Oh, here, congratulations, here's breast cancer. You need to deal with total hair loss, radical surgeries. Like why isn't it going faster for you? Anyway, so before all that happened, I was in the process of this like self-love journey, right? I'm like in my mid 30s, I'm starting over again. And everywhere I looked, it was like, all you have to do is love yourself. Just love yourself. Self-love is the answer. And as a Taurus and as somebody who is Dutch, I am like ridiculously practical and tactical. And I had like a mini tantrum and was like, nobody is actually telling you how to do this because I don't think anybody really knows step by step what do you do to begin that process of loving and furthermore accepting yourself. It's not just something you can meme to be like, oh, love yourself. Like you need to know how to do it. So I basically wrote a self-love manifesto that is step by step. Here's how you do it. And it goes through my own story, through having an abusive stepmother, through this ridiculous stupid divorce, through breast cancer, and really charts out this process of like, okay, it starts with looking in the mirror and talking to yourself as if you are a child and like really truly realizing that the person looking back at you is in fact a person. And that person needs to hear like,
Mhm.
encouragement and positive things that becomes your inner voice, not all the crap you've picked up from people around you. And it really does. It's kind of long. I did an audiobook as well in case people aren't really readers. But it is a self-love manifesto, and by the end of it, you will see yourself in a different light.
It is it's a good
It's a
size.
tome.
I want you to
Yeah,
show
it's
people
like
again. It's a look at that. It's
no,
almost like a rom-com novel,
yeah, it's also
but for
like,
yourself.
yeah, exactly. I just opened it up to a page that says hashtag relatable. So yes, but it's like a 400-page book, but the font is also big and the spacing is big because I'm very dramatic when I write. So there's got to be like a lot of spacing for dramatic effect too.
I
But
just
really,
love that
ultimately,
the thing that you read just now, hashtag relatable, that you have that in your book. I was like, this is so Lise. I love it.
it is great. It is one of three. So there's another one that follows it called Alone, The Truth and Beauty of Belonging, that really looks at like I wrote it during the pandemic and it was like, we were talking about being alone, but we're talking about lonely. Some people pay $10,000 to go on a silent retreat to be alone. And some people are spending $10,000 to not ever be alone, but to keep people around them. So what the hell? Like, what is the difference?
Hmm.
But it talks about loneliness and entrepreneurship and parenting and marriage. It like covers all the gamut. And then the third one is coming out this spring, and it's about like these are all self leadership. The third is actually about leadership. Like how do you really step into being the best possible version of yourself to lead, either in your family, in your own business, or at work if you're corporate.
I love it. I'm so proud of you. That is so
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
I had no idea that it was part of a 3-part series, so I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. And I want this, your second one sounds amazing of
It's
just
really good
talking
too.
about, yeah.
I like it too.
Yeah, anything
I'll
that
show
comes
you.
through your hands and out of your mouth is really good. Guys, look at all these books.
I
I
know, it's
love
just
the stack
ridiculous.
of your books here. This is so
And
good.
and I got a whole other bookshelf in front of me, but then this is the
Oh,
second one alone.
oh, look
I know,
at
I love
it.
it too.
It's so good. I'm
So
so
yeah,
proud of you.
thank you.
Okay. So that's awesome. So when the Moxie podcast started, it started to just like interview entrepreneurs, and then it's
Mhm,
kind of morphed into wonderful conversations about
mhm,
like all different things. Like I said, this year we've taken a really different approach of each month we're talking about different themes and whatnot. So
mhm,
I've really enjoyed this month so far because it's really, yeah, behind the scenes, the
mhm,
why, and like and of course we can say the whole why of our business, but I think there's more to our story and the why we put out stuff, because the reality is there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this world. There's not as many entrepreneurs and thought leader, like
mhm.
who are also thought leaders in this world that put
Yes.
out stuff, because we already as CEOs and leaders and
Mhm,
self-made businesses have to be vulnerable in our own self, especially in all of that. And then to put out your testimony, kind of
I
your
know.
deepest darkest secret, like it becomes a whole different ball game. So were you nervous? I kind of like talking
Mhm,
like at the beginning of thinking about, okay, I'm about to like share stories, because so when I put out Let It Be Wild, there was 2 chapters that I rewrote. I felt like 100 times because
yeah.
and I know you have some intimate, obviously, stories
Yes.
of parents, things, but I felt like it
Yes.
talking about divorce, talking about my parents' divorce and talking about all these things. I was like, I want to be respectful of their story, but this is
Mhm.
my story too. And this is what has
Yes.
shaped me to be me, and it needs to be known. But then I also, what's been so strange, and I'm sure you get this too, is people walk up to you now and they know everything about you. And I'm
I know.
like, how do you know that? And I'm like, oh,
I
right.
know.
I put it on
I
paper.
published it. I know. So I think I did a really good job because I have children. I mean, you have children, you know that protecting them is like the number one priority, right? And so I think I did a very good job of being, I didn't write the details of my divorce. I definitely wrote books that they could read as adults and not feel like violated in any way. But when it came to my own story, like it didn't even occur to me until after the second one came out alone, and I was at the grocery store, and I'm like, I got my card, I'm getting ready to get all my things, and I tell a story in the book about how it was really written from a place that I was single for much longer than I wanted to be single for, and so that was, like, the point of origin for that book, and so I had written some pretty, like, specific details about what that meant for me, and I told that story about, like, I'd had sex and there was a tampon stuck, and a friend of mine had to like, I had it was stuck for days, and so eventually a friend of mine had to
You wrote
come
this in a
over.
book, Lise?
Yes, and it's a hilarious story until I was at Foodland, and a local realtor came up to me, she's like, "You know, that happened to me in college." And I was like,
Oh,
"What have I done? What have I done?" So,
did you have to go to
hindsight.
the hospital?
No, because I had a friend who was a badass and I had been
It
studied to be a
helped you in this
midwife.
situation.
Yeah, she just reached right up and took it out.
Good thing you've already had kids, because
I
what
know, I
what does
know.
it matter now?
Like, one, that's an insane story, but two, and I was like, I was so alone. I didn't have people to share that with. So I was like, I'm gonna tell this story for everyone to read. It was like, okay, we may have blurred the lines there a little bit, but nonetheless,
This is
what am I
Moxie
gonna do
Uncut,
now?
really unhinged, least version. We're bringing all the stories. It's already published on paper, so we're just putting it in the
Exactly,
sound waves.
exactly.
So that is so funny. Yeah, I think it's just really interesting, because there are even things I've written in my book that I just don't really remember fully,
Yeah.
right? You just like, you were there. We don't necessarily like pick it up and read it. It's our own experiences. Once it's on
Mhm.
paper, it's on paper. So And then I realized, and I was just at like a family reunion, and like my aunt came up and was like, I've read your book. And I was like, that's amazing. Wait, you've read my book. Like amazing. I was like, felt so supported by her. And then I was like,
Ah,
you know about my
everything.
drunkenness on that beach where I almost broke my ankle and how I was wasted. And that's all in the book.
Ah, charming, I know. Now, the
So
flip
good.
side is that I'm sure you have experienced too, that you've had so much good feedback of people being like, oh, I relate to
So
this
good.
and this. Like, yeah. And that makes it all, it makes the vulnerability
Yeah. Well,
hangover
you
like
know
really
what?
pay off.
Yes. And like I said, the why what's beautiful about again being an entrepreneur, but then also being in the thought leader space is people get to know you on such a different level. And so,
Totally.
me being like, I think the biggest surprise for me in my book was like I speak a lot about my faith journey, which I don't
Yes.
necessarily fully express all the
Yeah.
time, whether it's in content creation or even on this podcast.
Mhm,
So it's interesting because I've had reviews of like, oh my gosh, she talks a lot about God and her faith, but in
mhm,
a very beautiful way that people didn't feel
mhm.
offended. So I felt really good about that, where I was like, I could still be. And I mean, for me, it was a really big prayerful journey and in
Yeah.
that effort of like, I wanted to share that part of my life because that's so much a part of
It's
who I
huge.
am. Um, and I felt like it was really received well. So I really liked it, but it
I
did
love that.
surprise people because they're like, I was reading this to read about the story of building a money collective. And now you're telling me all about you,
I
how
need to
much you
pray.
love Jesus and your husband and all these things. I'm like, well, welcome to my life. That's part of building a money.
And also, how true is that though? Like
Yeah.
whenever I'm working with clients, I'm so adamant, oh, and for myself too, obviously, but I'm really adamant that there's the business that you run and there's the person that you are. And while they have overlap, they are not one and the same, right? Like you are not your business. It is independent of you. Because otherwise, what I see with people all the time, it happens in corporate as well. If your business doesn't work out, or if your career ends or you get fired, then you take that so personally. It's like, oh, my
Yeah.
business failed, therefore I am a failure. Like I got fired from this job, therefore I got fired. Like I am failing. And we
Mhm.
have to be so diligent to separate those things out. And the other side of it is that if you are building something like you are building, like I am building, it it is not just a one track thing. Like it is so multifaceted that pulls in so many different
Mhm.
aspects of your
Yeah.
life that when you're running this kind of business or platform, it really does become like a holistic place.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit of practical steps that you give to
Mm,
your clients on that? Because I find that it's even been in the last 2 years, that I feel like I've been able to separate myself and
yep,
my identity from, because I started building Amani when I was 20. So it's
that's
like, it's
wild.
been it's
Yeah,
a third, almost half of my life I did
yes,
this thing. So
yes.
like, I felt like I started a couple years ago for me. So I always have like a word of the year for our organization. And
Mhm,
that
mhm,
word of the year used to always be like my word of the year too. And then I'm
mhm,
like,
mhm.
whoa, these can be very different
Big
things. So that
difference.
was kind
Yeah.
of the first thing that I separated. And that felt so big. And then I started to really like, I finally got to a place this year where I told my husband, I said, if anything were to happen to Imani, God forbid, I would hate that to happen. But if
Mhm,
anything were to happen to Imani Collective and we were to close tomorrow, I would
mhm.
be okay. When
Yes,
that is a large statement, because if you would have even asked me last year at this time, I would have
yes.
been a hot mess. So I would love, yeah. So people listening, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast, like what's some
Mhm.
practical advice to even take steps to maybe even think about that separation?
Okay, so one, I will say this, and this could be an unpopular opinion, but I'm gonna say it anyway, that I think that if you're like a man in corporate, your career becomes your identity. I think that if
Mm,
you are a woman in business or you're a woman running a business, so that's like the business becomes your identity. And so I think it's a little bit nuanced, but I remember distinctly meeting somebody a number of years ago at a party who was obviously retired, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Bob McDonald, former vice president of this bank." And it was like, man, he introduces himself as who he, quote unquote, used to be, right? And that always really sat with me. So when we're talking about
mhm,
like kind of separating church and state, it's so important to first look at you've created a thing, but that thing is not you. So if it's like, just a really simple one. If your business isn't getting clients, like if you've had a low cash flow month or quarter or half a year, whatever, the inclination is like, I am screwing up, like I am failing because I am not getting clients. It's like, no, hang on a second. If your business is not getting clients, then your business, there's something we need to tweak in the machine. It's not filling a gap because that's what business is. It's filling a gap and meeting a need. So if the business isn't fulfilling that or it's not meeting a need, then we have to look at the business. And obviously, yes, we have to look at what your role is in that. How are you contributing to that or how are you taking away from that? But it's not that you are not failing or that you are not personally responsible for that loss. It's that the business isn't functioning in a certain way. So I was just make sure that we start off understanding like, who are you, the person? Who is this, the business? Where do they overlap? But also, how are they separated? Does that make
Mm,
sense?
yep. Yeah. And I think that a lot of that too. So what's interesting with the intertwine of business and self too, is your values and your characteristics overflow into what your business is. And so then that
Mm-hmm.
also, like when I talk about doing the word of the year, even, I mean, I also my values of like community, connection, empowerment, all that. It's like, oh, well, that's Amani too. Like I had to
Mm-hmm.
figure out a way to also define it differently, in
Yes.
its own little form, and
Yes.
then be like, I am my own. So I think, yeah, it makes total sense. That story is, I'm incredible. I'm glad you shared that story about that guy introducing
Yeah.
himself because I also like one of the first questions, I didn't actually ask you this on the podcast, but one of the first questions I normally ask is like, what are you best known for?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
always curious how people answer this question because I just put it out there. You can answer it in any way. Some people go
Mm-hmm.
career, some people say go characteristics. I'm best known for being
Yeah.
kind. Some people say all their hats they wear. Like there's no
Yeah.
wrong or right answer, but it is really telling to kind of see how you
Immediately.
navigate like what are you best known for? I also like the question of like what do you like when you die, your legacy, what do you want to be known for? Because the
Yes,
reality is that's a really telling question too because it's not
it
about
is.
career most of the time. It's like I want people to know I was kind and generous and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like then how do we shape that to now, you know?
I'm best known for being a taco enthusiast, and it actually it's like I mean, I'm happy for that, but also I wish I were better known for I wish people were like, "Oh man, she's the best coach," which people say, but it's like when people see a taco, they like send me the meme. So, but I couldn't agree with more with you. I think the
This is
other
I
thing
just want to stop you. This is why we're like best friends. Like, or if we lived in the same neighborhood, we would see each other every
continent.
day. I just literally retrained. Yeah, the same continent. Gosh, we're like across the world, across the pond from each other.
I
I
know.
literally just retrained our people on tacos here because we have a taco. Did you know I have a taco business?
I did not know that. Are you serious? How do we not talk about that?
If you ever come to Kenya, you can now have my tacos. But I
Oh
left
my
for
God.
6 months, and you know what they were doing to my tacos?
What?
Putting ketchup on them.
Oh God. They are not
Holy.
the same.
I was flabbergasted. Is that
Oh my God.
an intense enough word? I was like, so I
Yes.
shut down the business for only 2 weeks.
Oh
I retrained them, and today they brought me some good chicken tacos, some fish taco, and I was like, this is how you make a
that
taco. I had to like
is
retrain them from the ground
hilarious.
up. So
That's hilarious.
that was a little squirrel moment segue. Can you remember the important things that you were
Yeah.
saying just a minute ago? Okay,
So
good.
this is what I was going to say, and why I made the delineation point between like I really believe men feel this with their career identity, and women. I mean, almost my entire world is women in business, either women in corporate roles or women like in
Mhm.
their own corporate role that they've created. And when that is your whole world, and all you see is women in business, women in business, women in business, you forget about the patriarchy. And so when I start to look at like my husband's business, when I start a business, I'm like, I'm obviously going to bootstrap this because otherwise, where would I get the cash? Like, I'm just going to create this out of nowhere. When my husband goes to like start a business, he's looking for capital financing. And so suddenly, and opening up to more of his network and like how his friends and colleagues do business, it's like, ahaha, they are just a person who is purchasing a business, or they are a person who is looking for like other people's money to build the business. And that to me was a huge differentiator between
Wow.
like how how it works in like the patriarchy, and then how women in business work. Women in business, I think, almost across the board feel solely responsible to self-fund to, and sometimes it's been out of historically they haven't been able to get funding. So it's like, okay, well, I want to
Hmm.
do this, so I am going to create that funding. But when you start to look at like the forest through the trees, or you really start to zoom out, people are doing this in different ways because, if my husband's life insurance shuts down, life insurance business shuts down, it doesn't mean that he's a failure. It means that he's moved on from the business. It's not a
Hmm.
part of him. Whereas I really have observed that women in business, if the business isn't doing well, it's like, I am such a failure. Like, I can't believe I
Hmm.
failed at this. Like, what did I do wrong? It's like, no, 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 no. We really have to back up. Like, who are you as a person without the business? I love that question. What are you known for? What are your hobbies? What brings you joy? Because
Hmm.
almost inevitably, people who are women who are passionate entrepreneurs are like, I just love my business. And it's like, that's cool. You're allowed to love your business. And like, otherwise you wouldn't do it. But also, what else do you love? Like, what else
Yeah.
outside of work really lights you up? And that starts getting people thinking down a different
Hmm.
self-identity path as well.
And to not turn that into a business. That's what I always
And
say
to
to my
not
boyfriend.
monetize it. I know, and that is so hard. And I
It's
don't think
so hard.
but it's also not our fault, right? It's like we're so conditioned, like, "You're good at this, monetize it." And it's like, "Can I just do paint my numbers because I like it?" Instead of,
Yeah.
like,
That was
selling my
like
painting.
that was like pottery, right? I like that
Yes.
was my hobby and I said I cannot monetize this. And I gave myself a time frame of like because I immediately will make excuses. Well, I'm training people here and they
Yeah,
need jobs and blah blah blah. And I was like, no, 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 I can't do this.
yeah,
So I gave myself at least like this has to be mine for like 2 years and then I can resurface and talk to
right on.
it because obviously working in an artisan space, it's natural to be like, oh, let's add that.
There's gonna be
But I think in
crossover.
anything,
Yeah.
yeah, so much crossover. I think in anything that we do, I mean, even in digital products, and they were like, oh, okay,
Yes.
this is awesome. Like, this is a cool worksheet I created for myself. Like, now I want to sell
Now I'll sell it, which thanks capitalism. Thanks for stealing all of our joy. You know what I mean? And it can be a great thing. I love what I do. I love what I
Yes.
do. But there's also this narrative of like, oh, she loves what she does so much. She'd do it even if she weren't getting paid. Not true, my friends, because
Mm-hmm.
if there were not a paycheck coming in for this, I wouldn't do it because it is not my identity. It's a thing that I do. I happen to be incredibly gifted at this thing, and this thing brings me a ton of joy, and I feel grateful every day that I get paid to do something that I'm really good at and makes an impact. But that's a full trifecta. And if there's no
Mm-hmm.
income there, it doesn't really say anything about who I am as a person. I just have a skill set that I would have to use elsewhere, right?
Yes. Okay, we're running out of time, but I am like this question. Okay, prepare yourself because this question could be
Okay.
a whole podcast episode. So I
Okay.
need you to answer this question
In a
succinctly.
succinct way.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. I'm hitting you with it. So I started in the nonprofit space. So money has always been weird for me
Mhm.
in the beginning. Well, and I love that you talk about money in the relationship. So a lot of that for me was because of this. So let's see if I can succinctly ask you this
Mhm.
question. Okay, so how what would be the advice or maybe did you ever have to struggle with and how did you get through this of pricing
Mm.
pricing. We're gonna talk about pricing here because I
Mhm.
think in the beginning, especially because I've done strategic coaching, different things where it's just like, oh, well, like I just have these resources and I feel for them and I want to walk with them and they're a nonprofit and they don't have, anyways.
Mhm.
Did you ever struggle with pricing? And I don't want to say for what you're worth, because I had a podcast interview one time with an
Mhm.
amazing woman, and she's a financial representative, an African American woman in the United States, and she's like, "Do not ask me how to define my worth because that relates to back historical and slavery."
Mm.
So it was a whole thing. So I don't know exactly
Hmm.
how to phrase, I have trouble phrasing this question, but I respect that. And I always
Yeah.
remember that memory. So how do you price your basically services to
Yeah.
represent the quality and the excellence of your work that you offer, but at the same time you're empathizing because people need you. Like it's like that
Yes.
whole emotional thing that I really
Yes.
think only women truly struggle with. Because I meet
Check,
men and they're
check.
like, they're like 50,000. We've talked
I
about this with
know.
crazy people that I
Yes.
know you've dealt with. But
Yes.
how, if someone is going through that, maybe we can say that if someone is going through that right
Yeah.
now, where pricing is their biggest thing, they want to be accessible, they're worried about too much,
Yes.
but they know that their services are worth that much because of the quality they bring. What's your advice to them?
Okay, so one, personally speaking, I only ever charge what I would pay. Now, I am always too expensive. People are always like, "You're way too expensive." I'm like, "Listen, honey, when I charged $1,000, people are like, that's way too expensive. When I charge 25,000, people are like, that's way too expensive." I'm like, "Bro, it's always going to be too much money for you. Like, just be
It's
honest
true.
with yourself." So I charge what I would be happy to pay without the stomach drop of anxiety. So I've had my prices low, my prices have gone way up. And post pandemic, as a correction, I dropped my prices because I'm like
Mm-hmm.
very aware of the climate. I'm like, I actually wouldn't, I have paid 50,000, as you know, and it's like I would never pay that
Mm-hmm.
now, but I would pay this. But the other thing, and without even doing like a plug, there is a resource that I can share with you that I created, and it's a strategic pricing guide. And it's literally like how many things, like how many units do you need to sell to like, or how many do you want to sell and how much money do you want to make overall? So we just do a very, very, very simple
Mm-hmm.
calculation that if you need to make this much and you can comfortably sell this many products or have this many clients if you're a servicepreneur, then it's like it's literally a division equation to figure out how much you need to charge per unit. It's so simple, and I can share that with you because it's so freeing for overthinkers in particular.
Mm-hmm. First of all, you can always plug on Moxie. So everybody listen, we'll put that in the show notes. You guys all need to go get that resource.
Mhm.
That's awesome. That's a
It's
beautiful
so
answer.
easy.
Okay. We are far, far, far over my normal time frame of
Sorry.
like 30 minutes. No, I'm like the biggest chatterbox ever. And we started with Love is Blind, and I've had a squirrel
And then
moment
you
talking about
you dropped a
tacos.
taco truck bomb on me, so I know I'm scattered.
Yeah, you guys are just experiencing me and Lise not having talked to each other for a bit, and we're getting it all on the podcast. So it's great.
Yeah, we
It's
both have
great.
ADD.
We just hope we brought great energy vibes into your sound waves.
Yes.
um okay. We leave the podcast with what's one last thing to live by. I really want people to be encouraged this whole month of knowing that I think really knowing, we see people and we're like, man, I want that. Or
Mhm.
man, I mean, we put people on pedestals really easily and we compare ourselves all the time, no matter how we try to get out of that cycle in
Mhm.
our head. And then we get imposter syndrome and it's stupid and it's crazy. The reality is there's such a journey behind that
Mhm.
person, how they got there. And that's why I really wanted to bring to the table kind of a little bit behind the scenes, the why. We got to plug into other stuff today, which I love too. But what would you share just to motivate kind of that one last thing to live by for our community this week?
Very simply, embrace yourself. We're all gonna die. And I don't know, I don't know how to sugarcoat that. Like, we are all going to die. And so, like, we get so bound by the rules and we got to do it this way and it's got to take that. It's, honey, you are going to die. Like, you are you're closer to being dead than you are to being born. And so, from that ridiculous lens, please do the thing that you want to do. Like, please try. Please allow yourself to experience joy and fun and pleasure and silliness. Like, please let yourself do that because no one gets out of here alive. So, like, dial it back and maybe have a little more fun. Sorry, Jenny, you asked.
I love you so much. My cheeks hurt from this episode. Guys, you are all going to die. But go
Well,
have your day and cultivate
you're a
kindness and find
motivational
joy.
speaker, I noticed. Oh, interesting. That's not motivating at all, but it is actually if you just listen to it.
It really is.
Ugh.
I have no words. That's a great mic drop. That's a great ending of this podcast. You're all going to die, so make the most of it. We're all going to end up in the dirt. Back to
So let's go grab tacos.
let's go grab tacos.
Yes.
And let's go frolic across continents.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Leisse, for joining
My
me
pleasure.
today. We'll catch up off mic so people don't get to
Okay.
catch all the goodness. We love you guys so much. And I just am so grateful for this community over so many years. So this whole month, again, we're going to be talking to people about behind the scenes, their love for what they do, their why. And I just hope it encourages you to go chase yours. And as always, Moxie on.